Well, you know, Disneyland was predicted to be Walt's folly.
A lot of people, including his brother Roy, thought that he'd flipped out.
I think everyone thought he was crazy, like they did when he said he wanted to do a feature-length cartoon.
He sent a number of people back to the amusement convention in Chicago.
And they all said it won't work.
Tell Walt he's nuts.
You're wasting money on stuff that doesn't generate revenue.
How's he going to sell commercial space to people if there's only one place to go in and out?
And the idea of fancy landscaping is ridiculous.
Well, he's going to put in all these flowers and people are going to trample them.
So they were very critical of the whole concept of a storytelling park.
The people that Walt had sent came back and told him about it.
Harumph was his reply.
He said, great. If they had liked it, I would have been worried.
Panic he did not.
Hello, I'm Julie Andrews. For 50 years, more than 6 generations of families and friends from all over the world have gathered together in the happiest of places to experience Disneyland's special brand of magic, filled with fun, nostalgia, fantasy, and adventure. The park has always been very special to me, and having known the man who created this dream, it is wonderful to see how people everywhere continue to embrace it as their own. No other form of entertainment is as universally beloved and cherished as Disneyland by people of all ages, backgrounds, and origins. A trip to this park truly is a homecoming. Disneyland's history is as multifaceted as the park itself, and who better to tell this incredible story with its trials, tribulations, milestones, and memories than Walt Disney himself and all the talented people who for 50 years have lived the dream and helped to make it happen. Here now is the real Disneyland story.
All my life, I heard him talk about doing this kind of a park, and as the years went on, from the time I was 5 and until he finally did it when I was 21, the dream just grew. From a very humble little thing that maybe would be contained on the studio lot to something quite grand, promising and delivering lots of good things.
Now, for my part on this presentation, I've been asked to tell you how Disneyland evolved from a dream to a reality. Now, it was about 1954 that we came up with this, what you might call the climax to the dreaming stage. This was the concept that we hoped Disneyland would eventually be. Now, we made a lot of changes through the years, but this still remains the basic plan.
Well, Walt was a genius at assembling people around him that would stimulate him. And he had a whole bunch of artists that were first class. The most finished talent of them all was Herbie Ryman.
I was curious why Walt wanted to see me. And he said, Herbie, he said, I'm going to do an amusement park. Roy has to talk to the bankers. we've got to show them. We got to show them what we're going to do. And so I got excited, and I said, well, gee, I said, I'd like to see it too. And he said, you're going to do it. I said, no, I'm not. You've known about this for several weeks. Now, why do you wait until Saturday morning before the Monday to expect anybody to do a good job? And he went over and stood in the corner, and he kind of turned around and looked at me, and he said, will you do it if I stay here with you? So, of course, Walt, as you know, was a very persuasive person.
Now, at the foot of Main Street, about where you're sitting, is the plaza. The plaza, or the hub, is the heart of Disneyland. Shooting out from here, like the 4 cardinal points of the compass, Disneyland is divided into 4 cardinal realms: Adventureland, Tomorrowland, Fantasyland, and Frontierland.
One thing that he insisted upon was that there be a very, very conspicuous castle, because the castle is going to be the symbol of this whole place. Fred Jerger had done a beautiful model of this castle. When I saw it, I said, I don't like it.
And he kind of looked at the castle and he said, well, and it split, the model split in half, halfway through, and he said, what if we take it and move it around like this?
Dick said, now, Herbie, he said, quit playing with that. Put it back. Put it back. He said, Walt's going to be here any minute, and Walt won't like it. Turn it around. Put it back.
Walt walked in, and everybody went, oh, Herbie, what did you just do? And everybody was waiting for the shoe to drop, for Walt to come over and say, I hate this. But Walt looked over and he goes, hey, that looks good. Let's do it that way.
Oh, I like that a lot better. So then Marvin and Dick began to like it a lot better. But it was always a confused point with us, and today this is facing inside.
You're actually looking at the back of the castle as it exists today. The back was the front.
Now, on a site of 240 acres near the city of Anaheim in Southern California, right about in here, we've begun to build Disneyland the place.
I'm the first guy that saw that site, bar none. It was a bunch of orange groves.
Prior to Disneyland, this is where I grew up, and this was all flat ground and orange groves.
Anaheim was that little town on the way to the beach, and we needed something to establish a good, solid economy, and we were out actively hunting for industrial expansion.
Our home was located over about in New Orleans Square, and it was moved with another home, and it was used as an administration building for the first few years of Disneyland's existence.
One of the great things we had going for us in the early days was ignorance. Ignorance meant you tried things because you didn't know better.
Walt had the idea of building Disneyland, but didn't have the money to do it.
There was a lot of people that said, he's gone, he's dead, he's done. Because he had hocked the whole studio. If it had gone down, the studio would have gone down with it, because everything was tied up in the park. And most of the people that I worked with didn't think he was right, because everybody was worried about their job.
Well, it's always hard to get somebody to see something that's never been done before. It's a big problem because there's no precedent for you to base a judgment on. And so people have to have a leap of faith. And trying to convince people to have a leap of faith, especially people that, maybe accountants or people that have to invest in something, it's extremely difficult because their imaginations don't soar the same way creative people do.
I think, my dad believed in it to the point where he felt like he could go sell it, and did, to ABC, to some others.
Walt Disney and Roy Disney were a great team. Walt was a tremendously creative person, but also a good businessman. Roy was a unbelievable financier, but had an appreciation for entertainment. And together, they really made things happen.
Oh, it goes back so far. I had different cost estimates. One time it was $3.5 million, and then I kept fooling around with it, and it got up to $7.5 million. And I kept fooling around a little more, and pretty soon it was 12.5. And I think when we opened Disneyland, it was $17 million.
ABC Television also came to the fore and actually owned 33% of the original park.
Now this dream really started to come to life in July 1954 when the bulldozers moved in and started leveling the site. To build our Magic Kingdom took more than a magic wand. It took earth movers. This was no place for a man with a hand shovel. Scooping out lakes and broad riverbeds paid off in enough dirt for rolling hills, islands, and mountains. There was an opening date to meet, and time was running out.
And we ran out of money and almost had to stop construction at $17 million. And that's what happens when you try to make a thing as special as Disneyland, in a short time, less than a year.
Men and machines shifted into high gear. Work progressed at a fast pace, unbelievably fast. The tempo was terrific, but the carpenters were on the beat. Rome could have been built in a day if these crews had been on that job. After many hectic yet happy weeks, the big day arrived. On July 17th, 1955, we opened the gates to all people from all over the world to enjoy this Magic Kingdom with us. In the town square, there's a bronze plaque. Its words tell the purpose for which Disneyland was created. To all who come to this happy place, welcome.
Disneyland is your land. Here age relives fond memories of the past, and here youth may savor the challenge and promise of the future. Disneyland is dedicated to the ideals, the dreams, and the hard facts that have created America, with the hope that it will be a source of joy and inspiration to all the world.
Well, Disneyland is just unique. That's the reason that it can't be duplicated anyplace else. And even though we've obviously built enormously great and popular parks around the world, whether it be in Walt Disney World or Tokyo or in France, Disneyland, there's something just special about it.
When you take all the components and put them together at Disneyland, you've got what I consider, and I use a salad as a metaphor. You have the most beautiful salad that was ever built. You have croutons, you have garlic, you have oregano, you have lettuce, you have tomatoes, you have all that. That represents Disneyland. Other theme parks are just lettuce and tomatoes. You know what I'm saying? So they don't have the total taste of it.
And in that salad, everybody can find something they like. And that's what Disneyland is. I think Disneyland continues to be a wonderful salad.
There was something really like having 5 desserts all at once, about Disneyland. And I still love it. I take my kids down there today, and it's like being a kid again. You're going on these rides, and wow.
Well, prior to the opening of Disneyland in 1955, there was a plumbing strike. And we had a big meeting. I remember being there, and because we weren't very big in those days. So the decision was, should we have drinking fountains or restrooms? Because there literally wasn't enough time to get both done. And Walt said, well, we've got to have restrooms, and people can drink Coke and Pepsi, but they can't pee in the street.
Most people remember, particularly Disney people, remember the opening day as a total disaster because the rides broke down. It was hotter than heck in the middle of July. They had almost twice as many people as they had planned for. They ran out of food. Almost every imaginable thing that went wrong.
They tried to schedule invitees to come at certain times during the day, and it didn't really work that way. Everybody wanted to come at once. The little sleepy community of Orange County, they wanted to see all the stars and those that were coming to the event. So everybody came at once.
The whole park was covered with these huge cables because it was a live television show planned for that afternoon. And they didn't have tape or anything pre-recorded in those days. It was all really live. It was done like a football game.
I'd like to read these few words of dedication. A vista into a world of wondrous ideas, signifying man's achievements. I thought I got a signal.
Why don't you start the chain reaction with the ping pong ball to demonstrate to our audience?
Okay. Stand back, everybody. Go. Try again.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's Bob Cummings again, back with you. And like the Peter Pan fly-through,
Bob Cummings up on the pirate ship. Take it, Bob.
No light here. What would happen if you got out and sat on there so you get down?
There were very few characters around. There were some awful Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse costumes that were used on opening day. They were just looked like more like Halloween costumes, a black drape kind of thing. They had a lot of problems during getting the place open by that opening day. I remember hearing the stories later about how they dug out the rivers of America and they filled it up with water one night and came back the next morning. It was totally dry. There was a sandy soil and the water just plain disappeared. It was frequently called Black Sunday because it was a bad day for them.
Well, Walt was quite upset with the chaos of opening day. A lot of things weren't working. They had trouble with the garbage. The trucks didn't show up to pick it up. It was chaos time.
But you know, the thing that saved us, and that's where Walt was so right, it was our people. We weren't ready for opening, but our people were so friendly and so courteous and so excited that it was contagious, and that made up for a lot of mistakes we made that day. You stop and think about what made Disneyland successful in the very beginning is that people really thought that it was a great value.
A lot of attractions that aren't at Disneyland anymore, that were great favorites when they were here, went away because a better idea came along.
Based upon input from all the people that talked to Walt from around the world.
We're just in time for the big potato derby.
We made it was considered a gold-plated picnic ground.
They're off and running. Uh-oh, number 13 dropped his bit, and coming down the stretch is the winner by a potato's eyelash.
We call it Hollyland.
It's all good, clean fun.
I had the honor, or dishonor, of being the only manager of a land at Disneyland that failed.
One of the real initial failures in the park was the Mickey Mouse Club Circus in 1955. Fantastic circus, and nobody came. Why? Because they came to see Disneyland.
And I think one of the things we've got to watch out for is when you take out a favorite like, remember the flying saucers back in the 60s? But nothing came back to replace it. And so even to this day, you hear people talking about, when are you guys going to bring back the flying saucers?
Oh, what was the name of that ride we had in Tomorrowland?
The flying saucers, which you literally would float on air.
It had some issues.
And what was the name of that ride?
It was very complicated. In essence, it had a huge platform and there was a basement underneath of it. And you would ride in these great big inner tube type things. They were round, they'd hold about 3 or 4 people. And as they, with great force, blew air up through this floor, these tubes would run around on the deck.
But it had a positive and negative pressure.
But if you were just a little kid and you didn't weigh enough and you leaned left and right, the thing just sat there bouncing up and down.
Well, it took about 13 to 17 people to maintain this alone.
It took 27 guys to start it in the morning.
And worse than that, if you were a little too big for the flying saucers, you would get in and sit there and they'd launch it out and the thing would just sit there.
And it was always breaking down.
And it would just start bouncing, 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 and bounce the people out of the saucers.
The little, what do I call them?
The flying saucers, that's it.
was just great that you had a chance to go in and you floated on air and all of that.
It's on the list of stuff to bring back.
That and the house, the home of the future. The home of the future was always a great one, that you'd go in and you'd see all the things that you wondered why you didn't have them in your home. You know, that first electronic oven that was fantastic, you know, and this thing was built, kind of looked like a funny cross, you know, that was kind of like that and had the various rooms that you'd go into and all that.
Now, one of my favorite examples of how Walt worked and how Disneyland works was the Viewliner, the train of tomorrow, which a lot of people don't even know was ever here. It opened in 1957 and closed in 1958. It was here for a year and a half. And basically it was the monorail, but it rode on railroad tracks. It rode on regular train tracks on the ground instead of up elevated above. Then right after the Viewliner opened, Walt discovered the monorail in Germany running around on a test track. And he said, well, that's what I want. Came back and built a monorail that opened in 1959.
On the gala celebration of the completion of the project, the Richard Nixon family were on hand to snip the ribbon. Here we were with our monorail, the forerunner of rapid transit of the future, all checked out and ready to go, but somebody forgot to check out the scissors. Oh, to heck with it. If you can't cut it, break it. Right.
In 1959, when we reopened the park and rededicated the park, we opened the Matterhorn, we opened the Sud Ride, and we opened the monorails all in one day. It was brutal, but it was fun. It was exciting. It was interesting, and it made it work.
I can remember asking Walt that could we come up with some kind of a thrill attraction. And Walt says, Nunes, this is not an amusement park. And I says, no, sir, I realize that, but we really need to do what the guests want, and they want a thrill attraction.
Our Matterhorn was scaled for the first time on its inauguration. Since then, during the vacation months, climbing it has become a daily event.
The submarine voyage was a type of ride that really hadn't been attempted by many other amusement parks, and so the people riding in these submarines and getting the impression that they were submerging was really exciting.
The submarines themselves were designed to look very real and very official, and they had, you know, names like the Polaris and the Skipjack and, of course, the Nautilus after 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. So it wasn't played for laughs. It wasn't like a whimsical submarine ride. It was a very real one that had some elements of whimsy kind of integrated in there, just kind of behind the scenes. They had live mermaids that were kind of sunning themselves on the coral reefs and the rocks, and they had giant props. They had lyres and mirrors and jewels, and they held auditions in the pool at the Disneyland Hotel and tell people that, you know, we'll supply the mermaid fin, you know, if you will show up and prove your swimming abilities. There are many stories of rather ardent young men who admired the mermaids greatly, who wanted to get much closer. I guess they were heeding the siren song and found their way over the fence and into the submarine lagoons.
And you see where it was placed in the park. It was right between Fantasyland and Tomorrowland.
The perfect segue between the two.
You know, Walt had one foot in the past and one foot in the future.
Hello. Welcome to the moon. Tomorrow is a heck of a thing to keep up with.
As the years went by, everything there started looking older and older and older.
And now, here in Disneyland, the year is 1986, 1986. That's way ahead.
Now, this will give you a pretty good idea of the rocket ship in which you will soon be traveling to the moon. In this section are two television screens, one above and another one below.
So this rocket to the moon attraction was a very popular one. And when we finally went to the moon, it got kind of passé.
I know my kids back home would sure get a kick out of that.
So it was eventually changed to Mission to Mars.
And that's not all. Watch this.
It went from kind of flat and gray to less so, a little more friendly in 1967 with the addition of the moving vehicles and the people mover. Of course, that was the time of polyester, you know, the future fabric for everyone, special wear-dated fabrics and things. And so you had all those polyester wear-dated fabrics made into tunics and all kinds of very chic late 60s clothing.
In fact, they're the latest thing in moon fashions. But enough of that.
With the 98 Tomorrowland, you had a much more residential kind of future, I guess you could say, because you had plants and you had a bit more of an accessible future.
Well, Walt once said to me, not once, he said several times, I dream that one day nobody shows up. That's my nightmare. He knew that the show had to be fresh, that there had to be a new reason to come back. And the nature of getting people to come back is visibility and exposure, but it's mostly something new to talk about.
We created a new type of animation, so new that we had to invent a new name for it.
Audio animatronics?
Right, audio animatronics.
Walt came in and said, I want to do a little tea room, but he said, I want it to be, you know, like Polynesian, kind of a tiki room.
Oh, look at all the people. And welcome to Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room.
Dick Irvine, who was in charge of WIT at that time, asked John Hench to do a rendering of what the inside of the tiki room would look like. John held up his picture, and of course in there was pictures of birds in cages. And he says, you can't do that, John. And John said, why not? He says, because they'll poop in the food. No. He looks like a real bird, but it's not. He's just kind of a little mechanical bird. And then somebody else said, wow, maybe that bird would whistle to another bird. And then that bird would whistle back to another. And then, you know, maybe they might even sing a little.
In the tiki, 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 tiki room. In the tiki, 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 tiki room.
Now we're making these human figures, dimensional human figures move. Ever since I was a small boy in Illinois, I've had a great personal admiration for Abraham Lincoln. During our exhaustive research into Lincoln's life, we studied his mannerisms, his gestures, and even his voice characteristics to create a faithful likeness of this honored man. The final result is so lifelike that you might find it hard to believe.
We had great technical difficulties in getting the character to move properly in New York. And God would be going great, and then all of a sudden he would do a great jerk or decide to sit down.
The figure was not perfect, and not all the parts worked as they should. And as Mr. Lincoln made a gesture at one point, not all of his hand worked in the same fashion as it should have. And not all the fingers were symmetrical. I'll leave it to that.
Girls, can you let that go for a while? We just want to do a dry run on this thing. Okay, Waithel, you ready? This is the stage for Act 1 of the Carousel Theater of Progress. Stages for the other acts are being assembled at other places in the studio for a complete audio animatronic dress rehearsal. Now, this contraption here might look like something from outer space, but it's actually a control harness for programming the actions and gestures of our audio animatronic figures.
They had this wonderful concept of the people sitting in the carousel and moving around to different stages of the development in the world of electric facilities.
Shall we show them how it works?
Really won't. This is the Carousel Theater host. Whatever the man in the harness does, this figure will respond simultaneously in the same manner. Would you care for a light? I don't think we better. No smoking on the stage.
And he asked us to write something that give the theme of what it was like, what the whole era was all about, and also it could be played in ragtime and in jazz and in Dixieland and then into popular music. The same song could be played many ways. And so we had to write a very malleable tune.
Now let's hear the theme song of the Carousel Theater.
There's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow shining at the end of every day.
There's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow, just a dream away.
Well, it sounds pretty good. In fact, that's just the right spirit. East meets West. It's a small world, and that's the name of our latest attraction at Disneyland.
Small World was actually a problem song because we had to solve the problem that was happening at the conception of the ride.
Its stars are the children of the world. Every land from A to Z, from Asia to Zululand is represented.
And he said, I want this little boat ride with children. And we thought, oh my God, we just finished doing Mr. Lincoln, you know, an animatronic figure that stands up and talks. We just did the Carousel of Progress, all this. And he wants a little boat ride. So we all just kind of thought, wow, that's kind of strange.
From sketches and finished drawings, these scale models were constructed. Then by our electronic process, which we call audio animatronics, they were given voice and movement.
There was an explosion of creativity that took place because once we got the sets built, we had to bring them over to the studio, put them in a sound stage for each one of the areas, put Walt in a boat on wheels, and push him through at the same speed that the boat ride would be, so he could look at everything, and then he would give us a buy-off.
So we were brought in to write a singular song that would be simple enough to translate into many languages and have a singular thought involved.
During our voyage, we'll visit more than 100 lands. Let's see how many we can identify.
My understanding is throughout the world that other than the people kind of kid about the fact the music drives them nuts, it's still probably one of the most popular rides of all because, see, this was Walt's secret. He touched everybody with everything that he did.
You know, I really loved finding words that Walt Disney said that when he did them, they were really magic. For example, you think the word things is very simple and, you know, it doesn't mean anything. But when Walt said, now the pirates are going to burn and sack the town, and then we're going to do some exciting things.
The whole Caribbean area was full of pirates, and they were always sacking towns and things, little shops and things, and live plants and things, and the parade of the toys and a lot of other things.
And kind of threw it away. You said, what's he talking about? He just talked about burning and sacking the town, and then he's saying, we're going to really do some exciting things. It was just, it painted a word picture that you couldn't, I mean, it didn't mean anything when it was on paper, but when he did it, It was magic.
Well, you know, Walt Disney didn't invent fun, but he kind of perfected it. I think Walt taught us that it's okay to be childlike. You don't have to be childish, but it's okay to be childlike on occasion.
For the fields we go, laughing all the way.
You know you're on television. Howdy, folks. Well, I don't know about you folks, but it's way past my bedtime, and morning comes around early. And that's one of my favorite times here, too.
We would be out here in the Frontierland area, right over here by Riverbell Terrace, and Walt would suddenly come out. He would appear, and he would walk over to the dock area of the Mark Twain, and he would just stand there, you know, and he would look out across the rivers of America, looking out at Tom Sawyer's Island. And we always used to wonder, what was he doing out there? We'd see him many times in that same location.
We knew that he was sick and was over in the hospital there, but nobody knew how really sick he was. I remember the day he died, John Hench came back to my office, and we were reminiscing and about the old days, because you know, most of the people there didn't know Walt, hadn't had a chance to work with him. And we were talking about it, you know, and it was on the 15th of December, I remember very vividly, because that was the day I usually went out and bought my Christmas tree. So at noon they said, we're closing the studio, closing Imagineering. And I remember going home and I did stop and get my Christmas tree. But when I got home, it really hit me, and I just sat in my room and I just bawled like a baby. This was just, the man is gone, you know. I just cried and cried and cried.
It took everybody by surprise, including my father. He didn't know that he had lung cancer until, I would say, about 8 weeks before he died.
Someone called me at home, and I rushed out to the park just in time to see the flag go down on Main Street, which was a chilling moment. And when I walked in, all the employees were kind of in a state of disbelief. The word had gone out that Walt would probably have wanted the park to be open, so we were struggling to keep the park open that day.
Well, we lost the spirit. It's what's really sad. The day that Walt passed away, everybody that worked for Disney Studios or any part of Disney felt they worked directly for him, and so everybody lost him. Everybody did. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. And so, you know, you didn't have a father image. You didn't have a leader anymore. I mean, it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible because I don't know, there was just something about him that when you came to work, you were going to work for Walt. You know, you just weren't going to work you weren't going to a job. You were going to work for Walt. And I think he was in everyone's heart. And so it was horrible. It was horrible. It's like Ollie Johnson said, and most of us did. They cried all night. Sad.
As much as I love Walt Disney, about 2 days after he passed away and said, hey, we have to move on.
And what he was trying to do was use all the people, brilliant people that worked for him, and he knew how bright they were, better than you or me or anybody.
Walt had put together a very strong and creative team. And they were all intelligent people, and they learned from their experience of working with Walt.
Walt Disney only saw this one park, and only for like 11 years.
Life went on real quick.
We lost sinew and blood, but we didn't lose spirit and love.
Trying to define Disneyland is very difficult.
It's the only one of the parks that Walt actually walked in. Disneyland is huggable.
It is indeed that. It is huggable. There's an innate charm to Disneyland that is wholly unique. And it is and has become an American treasure.
Disneyland was a chance to walk into these wonderful places that we'd seen as visions and literally be a part of it, take a role in this incredible experience.
The most impressive thing about Disneyland is the promise that is made when you walk in, and that is that you're basically leaving today and entering the world of yesterday, tomorrow, and fantasy.
There's so many things that you want to just keep the way they are, and yet, of course, there's the idea that it's constantly changing, it's never finished, and it's always going to continue to evolve and grow with the audience.
So it's very important that we continue to refresh, continue to deliver new stories using new technologies, and even go back to some of our classic stories and add new magic that wasn't possible 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when some of those great stories were told.
He didn't see it, and I remember after his death going out there when I think it was the opening of the Pirate Ride, and going through it, and Ron and I and my sister and her husband, and one of us, I think Ron said, gee, I wish Walt could have seen this, and Bob said, he did. You know, it was all up here.
There was going to be really kind of a glorified wax museum walkthrough. And Walt came down on a weekend and he says, What's the matter, Dick? What's wrong with walkthroughs? And I said, well, sir, nothing, but they're limited in capacity, about 1,200 an hour. He said, well, Dick, you're going to get your ride through.
People are going to get on a boat here, ride through the lagoon, and then as they get around here, we're going to take them down a waterfall and take them back into the past, into the days of the pirates, you know, where the whole Caribbean area was full of pirates, and they were always sacking towns and things.
I suggested to Walt that maybe we could use a song in this. I half sang and half recited it to him, and it was the Yo-Ho song. And it's, yo-ho, a pirate's life for me.
We pillage, we plunder, we rifle and loot. Drink up, me hearty, yo-ho. We kidnap and ravage and don't give a hoot. Drink up, me hearty, yo-ho. Yo-ho, yo-ho, a pirate's life for me. We extort, we pilfer, we filch and sack.
Da-da-da-dum-de-dum. Half the time I don't remember the lyric that I wrote.
Yo-ho, yo-ho, a pirate's life for me.
You totally know that guy's not a pirate. It's a bunch of plastic and, I don't know, somehow it's moving. But you believe it. That was something that Walt and the Imagineers were really tuned in to, finding that really rich, luscious environments. Of all the environments in the world, they chose these that seemed the most rich, I guess. Is the only word I can think of.
Imagineering is the outgrowth of WED Enterprises, and WED Enterprises was based on Walt's initials, and it was a place sort of removed from the studio that Walt created where people could think about magical things. And during the course of time, the word Imagineering came out of that because he realized he had a staff of people that imagined things and people that engineered things.
And Mark Davis is the master in charge of our House of Illusions, or what do we call it? A haunted mansion. Haunted mansion and supernatural.
had this huge room with all the black drapery hanging in it, and we had black lights, and we developed all these crazy things. We had a ghost that blew up with a squirrel cage fan under it, and it would shimmer and shake, and it was done with black light paint. And so one day, we get a call from personnel, and they said, the janitors would like you to have you leave the lights on when you go home at night. Okay, so Yale and I put on a little light over here, and we completely rigged the whole room with an infrared beam. But the deal was that when you broke the beam, everything went off. The ghost would come up, the head would fly off, the monster would fall apart, the other skulls would light up. And so when we left, everything was fine. The next morning, we came to work, the head was hanging in the center of the room, the ghost had been going all night long, and right in the middle of the floor was a broom. And we got a call from the personnel department and said, they're never coming back. You have to clean up your own room from now on.
Everybody has an idea how it was. It's, they're holograms. I said, no, they're not holograms. And then they said, well, how'd you do that? I said, how to do what? They're ghosts. They're real ghosts. Honestly, they're ghosts.
There are some people that believe a rumor that there was a Hatbox ghost in the attic area. This was a guy who was holding a Hatbox. His head disappeared and appeared in the Hatbox. Now, I happen to be one of the people who remember seeing that. But when I tell this story, everybody says, you're crazy, there's no record of it. So being the snoop that I am, I happen to have here a card which has on it the list of the Hatbox ghost that was used by maintenance to maintain the ride in the early years. You can see it's on parchment. But that actually was there, and it was actually maintained for a good few weeks at the opening of the ride. So there is proof positive of a character that did exist that no longer exists in the world-renowned Haunted Mansion.
And now maintenance knows where their missing card is.
Yeah.
One of the things that we're doing, and that we just recently did in the Haunted Mansion here at Disneyland, was said, okay, how do we reinvent some of the magic for that attraction? So for our guests who have recently visited the Haunted Mansion, now when they see Madame Leota in the seance room, her crystal ball is actually floating around the room. And now when they see the portraits in the portrait corridor after the stretching room, the portraits are actually changing with the lightning flashes that occur outside the window.
One of my favorites was, for me personally, the development of Splash Mountain, which Bruce and I worked together.
Yep, it was. And sometimes when you hear an idea, you just go, that's it.
The animals from Splash Mountain look like Song of the South. A flume ride through the world of Brer Rabbit and Brer Bear would be spectacular. And if we located it out in Bear Country, we'd solve the problem of nobody being out there.
So I grabbed a couple of other Imagineers, and we sat down and we made a list of all the scenes in the film and a list of all the figures in the attraction from America Sings that we had available to us. We'd take the note card with the name of the figure and put it next to the scene from the movie. And we went through and we put everything we could that we could think of. And then at the end, we had a whole bunch of figures left over. We had chickens and foxes and all these oddballs that didn't fit the Song of the South Brer Rabbit tails. So it was Chris Tietz who said, well, why don't we build a big showboat at the end of the ride, and we'll put all the figures that don't fit anywhere else on the showboat. So the big finale of Splash Mountain that everybody loves is this giant showboat rocking back and forth with all the characters on board dancing, and that was because we couldn't think of any place else to put them.
And that was the start of Splash Mountain.
If you look at Disneyland today and Disneyland before, you can see the references to the ways that entertainment are done today. They're completely different than they were done back in the 1950s, and it really just keeps progressing, and the audience today expect to see things like they are amazed by in movies that are out today, as opposed to movies that were in the 1950s.
There's an aspect of tradition and consistency that our parks keep around the world. It's always important to our guests that we do something new, something different.
I remember Tony standing in the middle of all the wreckage of Walt's favorite land, standing there going, what have we done?
Yeah, it was pretty scary.
That was quite a moment.
Yeah. But it came out great, and it was interesting. You hear guests say, when you do something like that, it's almost as though it was always this way.
that this is about the audience. It's about giving everybody a feeling like this was built for them and only them. You know, a very personal experience.
Back in 1983, a guy named Les Perkins heard one of my voice demos and said, you know, there's a lot of the characters that you do sound like some of the things we're looking for dialogue tracks in the dark rides in Fantasyland. So I came up with a likeness of Stromboli and Pinocchio and the Cockney Coachman. But Stromboli says, and they're just little bites as you go by, but Stromboli says something like, to me, you are belonging, my little wooden treasure chest. The Cockney Coachman says, you blokes going someplace? The German ringmaster on Dumbo, I do the safety spiel over there. The ringmaster says, you know, well, as we say to the animals, this is the end of the lion. Fantasyland.
We made partnerships with George Lucas, for example, when Michael Eisner and Frank Wells came into the company.
George was kind of the next generation of a Walt Disney, and we decided to bring Star Wars and Indiana Jones into the park. We hadn't made new animated movies for a while that were the kind of blockbusters that we finally got with Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin and Little Mermaid and so forth. And it was kind of a creative stopgap before the Disney company itself kind of reinvented itself.
And they were searching for ways to make the company more relevant to the audience. And Star Wars was the obvious choice.
Well, for me, the interesting things in terms of advancing the art form that is a Disney-themed show would probably begin with the introduction of Star Tours, which was the first time people had been put into kind of a military simulator experience, and we used it to tell a story.
In the case of Star Wars, we sort of said, what are the things in the movie that you always wanted to do? And I think everyone who saw Star Wars had that fantasy of being Luke Skywalker and being in the trenches of the Death Star and piloting an X-Wing fighter. And so that became a big part of what Star Tours is all about.
True to what Walt had done, first with audio animatronics and all the milestones that came in before me, I knew we had to take it to the next layer. While everyone was busy emulating Disney, it was time for Disney to go up another, bar on the ladder. And so we were working on what I termed the enhanced motion vehicle, which we introduced with Indiana Jones here. So it took the idea of being able to feel the experience in Star Tours as you watch a cinematic presentation. We feel the experience in Indy as we travel through an environment like Pirates of the Caribbean. So when a snake comes out to attack us, the vehicle goes away, almost like, being scared in the dark with a boo, and we can react that way, and you can feel the excitement of all these things happening.
And something that becomes that big and a part of the culture belongs at Disneyland. And I think, certainly that transcended all the other things. It's the same thing with our association with Pixar and the fabulous characters and stories that we jointly have helped to create, whether it be Buzz and Woody, on the Toy Story side, which, have become, worldwide phenomenons.
So if Disneyland is stepping into the movies, today we know that lots of kids love playing video games. So how do we take a video game and turn it into a three-dimensional experience in our parks?
So if you look at Buzz Lightyear's Astro Blasters, you're not only riding through the world of Buzz Lightyear, but you're actually a space ranger helping Buzz Lightyear accomplish his mission.
Part of it is we take our cue from the entertainment in the world that we experience and we enjoy. And part of it is just, letting your mind go crazy and coming up with ideas and knowing that we have an R&D group at Imagineering that pretty much can deliver almost anything you can dream up.
But people are taking these kinds of venues and moving them forward with 3D and Omnimax and integrating them into environments and making them more open and more free and more engulfing for the actual audience.
Soaring over California is such an extraordinary experience for our guests. Some people say everybody gets a front row seat, and you actually get to see the whole state in a matter of about 10 minutes in a ride vehicle that was created literally in somebody's garage as an erector set when we were trying to solve the engineering problem.
So the challenge for us as Imagineers, since we're putting you into the movie in 3 dimensions in our park, is how do we raise the bar on the magic? How do we bring the wow into everything we do?
We'll raise the bar by raising the quality level. We'll raise the bar by providing things that are different, that haven't been done before. We'll raise the bar by wow moments, by giving people experiences that causes them to say, only Disney would think of that, or only Disney can do that.
Transforming movies into attractions is the basis of Disneyland, from Davy Crockett to the early animated films. That is Disneyland. Disneyland is the three-dimensional realization of two-dimensional celluloid product. Soon it'll be three-dimensional celluloid product. But in any event, it's what's on the big screen ends up being something you can walk inside. And you can walk inside with your whole family.
You know, I think it's only right that movies are now made on Disneyland attractions, since when Disneyland was built, everything was taken from movies. You know, Disneyland was built by a bunch of movie people that, you know, built movie sets. And that's the reason Disneyland's at 5/8 scale. It's a three-dimensional movie set, and the attractions, basically all the original attractions for the most part, came from movies.
Well, here we are 50 years later, and Pirates of the Caribbean is now a box office smash in the form of not only 1, but 2 movies. But the most interesting thing about it is now we've taken the references and the stories from the movie and put them back into the attraction. So now when you ride Pirates of the Caribbean at Disneyland or Walt Disney World, you're going to find Johnny Depp. You're going to find Barbossa. Our newest story to be told at Disneyland is a rework of an old favorite. So we've married a classic, The Submarines, with a brand new story, Finding Nemo.
I have seen not only the renderings for the submarine attraction at Disneyland, I've walked the catacombs of the attraction in the dust, in the mud, and I am incredibly excited.
So the Submarines with Nemo and Friends will bring a whole new generation of guests to see a classic attraction with Nemo. I can't be more excited about it opening.
This is a trend that will continue as these partnerships and as these ideas really that become universal and become just a part of our ether.
There is a word that you hear often called the Disneyland that never was. Well, what is that? Well, for every attraction that we actually get developed and open here at Disneyland, I would say there's probably 20 that don't make it.
Ah, the Disneyland that never was. All the great ideas that are hidden away in the drawers that have never been built. We recently came across an idea for an attraction that kind of predates Star Tours. It was intended for Frontierland, and there would be a room full of mechanical horses, like those things you see out in front of grocery stores where the kids sit on the horse and bounce up and down. And so you'd sit on those things in front of a movie screen, and they were going to shoot a movie of a posse chasing through the West with the sheriff out front and all the other horses riding it. And there were all these drawings detail the whole thing. You'd put the camera on a pickup truck in the middle of the posse and videotape and cinemascope this big Western adventure. Then in the attraction, you'd sit on the horse, on the mechanical horse, and bounce up and down. That never got built either.
Sometimes, you know, in this realm of the Disneyland that never was, there are attractions that are developed, like the Museum of the Weird, that actually morph into an attraction that opens here at Disneyland. And in that case, it was the Haunted Mansion. It was something that Rolly Crump, one of our early designers, had developed.
And I did a candle man that was melting, and I did a chair that stood up and talked. And while I'm working on all of this, everybody else, the management at WED and the art director said, you know, that stuff's too weird. Walt's not going to like that. And they put all my stuff on a table and against the wall in the corner. Finally, Walt said, well, is that it? And Dick Irvine said, yes, Walt, that's it. He says, what's this stuff in the corner? So he and I both scooted our chairs over and sat in front of all this stuff, and I took him through it. He said, but it's weird. And I said, yeah. And he said, but how are you going to use it? So we went back and forth like this about 3 or 4 times. He says, I'm out of here. And he got up out of his chair and left the room. Everybody said, you know, Rolly, we told you he wouldn't like it. Wouldn't like it. Too bad. It was too weird. The next morning I come to work at 7:30, and Walt's sitting at my chair. He's in the same clothes he was wearing when he left that afternoon the day before. And he said, I didn't sleep last night. I said, you didn't sleep? Why? And he said, because of all that stuff you showed me, that weird stuff. And he said, Rolly, I know what we're going to do with it.
This is Roland Crump, who for the project here is sort of acting as the interior decorator of a house of illusion. What do we call it?
Museum of the Weird.
Museum of the Weird.
And they all said, you know, Rolly, we knew you had something there. And I said, yeah.
And then we built a whole land with time machines and aerial dirigible balloons, and we saw a movie on the docket for Disney called Island at the Top of the World about this flight to the North Pole, and so we said, we'll put that in there. Big mistake, because it tanked at the box office, and that was sort of what killed Discovery Bay. But if you get a first-year park map, or right at the beginning that Sam McKim illustrated, you'll see two lands on it. One is Edison Square, and the other is Liberty Street.
Ah, the Disneyland that never was.
You know, it is no matter what we do with our attractions and shows and our parades and all the marketing that we do, all of that is really is important. However, it's our cast members that that you hit on the front line of the park.
And so my first job at Disneyland, I was a sweeper in Tomorrowland the summer of 1977, the summer that Space Mountain opened. I loved being a sweeper. Everybody thinks, oh, it's just picking up trash. No, you know what's great about being a sweeper is you are out in amongst the crowds. You could hear people talking and the excitement. Everybody's happy there. You would get asked questions all the time because, you know, someone would need to ask a question. You were always the closest Disneyland employee, you know.
They're not employees, they're cast members. That word was created for a very strong reason.
A cast member is part of a show. Every day when that main entrance opens, you put on the show. You're drawing back the curtain. You're on stage.
When you come out of the door, you're always smiling. And I said, well, it's my trademark because, you know, you say you give us a good service. And I said, that's what I'm here for, you know, to help you for anything you need.
It's very important for you to believe that there aren't people in uniforms out here working, that there are people that literally have roles in the story that is Disneyland, and they live the experience. I was working over here at Adventure Through Inner Space, and there was a woman who was looking very perplexed and worried and had been standing there like for 15 minutes. And I said, can I help you? And we had a microscope in there where we shrunk guests down to the size of an atom. And you could see these little tiny people going by. And she said, I don't know. She said, my son went in about 15 minutes ago and he was supposed to wave when he got to the small part. And I haven't seen anybody waving yet. And so that to me was, and I realized her child probably came out about 20 minutes ago at the end of it.
As a cast member in the park, we want this costume to fit with the story. So if you're working in our emporium, you know, it's the turn of the century costume that you would have found in an emporium. But if you're on stage and you're Cinderella, we want that gown to glow.
It's clear when you go backstage and have an opportunity to interact with the cast members when they're not on stage, is their commitment, their own enthusiasm for being a cast member.
Being a ride operator on the Jungle Cruise, I'm going to brag here, because being a ride operator on the Jungle Cruise is the best job in the whole park. Okay, you want to hear my favorite Jungle Cruise joke? This is it. Okay, as you go through the hippo pool, and you go bang, bang, you shoot the hippos and all that stuff, you turn around, and you approach the native village, right? The first thing you see is a canoe full of skulls sitting there. So, and I'm always turned, so I'm talking to the boat, the people in the boat, talking about the hippos. I turn around, I see those skulls, and I scream, and I dive down and find a little kid and hide behind him. I said, don't make any sudden moves. You know, this is the natives. They can be very dangerous, but sometimes they're friendly. And then I'm sitting there, and I look, and as you come around the bend, they're dancing. They're doing that kind of jing, 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 dancing. I go, oh, ladies and gentlemen, this is extremely rare to see this. They're doing their famous, I can't find the bathroom dance. Everybody laughs, and you let them laugh a little bit, and you go on. Long pause, and you go, that's why they call them headhunters.
You're not going there just to be on a ride in an attraction park.
Well, when Walt imagined Disneyland in 1955, it really was a place where magic would be created inside what he called the berm, where everything was controlled and everything was a fantasy.
You know, there's just something in the air.
It's all a blend.
The people, the cast members, the attention to detail, the cleanliness.
You're going there to experience an environment.
It was just, you just the smell of the popcorn, see the horses, you know, and the horse-drawn street carriages go by, and that great pop, 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 the little cars, and that steam whistle of the train there.
You know, costumes and the smell of foods and the sounds that you hear.
And detail is what makes Disney so unique and original. You can have a main street, you can have walls, but if you're going to make them Victorian, if you're going to make them feel like a great time of the past, every day, every night, you think about the details.
You know, down to every lamppost, to the bolts holding it down.
Walt taught us details, to think things out to the very end, and those are just simple little formulas.
In between pictures, I'd work on Disneyland until one day Walt said, well, I think you're going to stay on Disneyland. And he says, you're going to like it, and I did. It's very much like a motion picture. I think it's very parallel to motion pictures. The fact that you have a long shot, you see something in a longer view, you come in from the medium shot, and you walk up and touch something, you're into a close-up.
If you don't buy into the magic, you're not going to buy the story. Now, you bring that to Disneyland here, and John Hench was often fond of saying, we go to such lengths to eliminate all of the contradictions, to make it so that when you walk down Main Street or you enter Fantasyland, you believe in it wholeheartedly. And then when we take you into an adventure where there's real magic, people will buy into that too and suspend their disbelief and enjoy an attraction as though they're part of it.
So when you come into Town Square and hear the band play their concert here, it's so important that you don't jolt our guests and have them playing something that's not appropriate to the streetcar with the horse and the old cars and the wonderful architecture of the turn of the century.
You know, we have the Disneyland Marching Band that has marched here from day one. They were supposed to be on a 2-week contract, and they're still here 50 years later. The entertainment division was really the division that was responsible for putting the show all together and bringing it to life. It really became what we call the glitter and goo division. We were responsible for putting the sparkle on the show, whether it was the Dapper Dans on Main Street or a special parade or a show on one of the stages.
Wally Bogue and the whole wonderful cast of the Golden Horseshoe Revue, which was always one of Dad's very favorite things.
I once did a scene in a musical comedy where I was beaten up by some character, and I spit out a couple of beans for teeth. Those were big lima beans. I used to hold 4 in my mouth and got a big laugh.
We then went on to produce special events.
Oh, Winnie the Pooh for president. I was hired in the early days of Disneyland because my forte is promotions. So in 1972 and 1971 earlier, we decided that we were going to run Winnie the Pooh for president. And they came here for the Pooh Political Convention that we had here live at Disneyland, and it was just wonderful.
Parades became a place where all the characters and people could see a single show that brought the magic of Disneyland to them.
Thank heavens for that, because here comes the parade.
You know, every one of our guests someday wants to be one of the Disney characters, whether it's a character you remember as a child or characters that your children are growing up with. And I would say it really became popular probably about 10 years ago. Every little girl wants to be a princess.
The most popular parade ever at Disneyland was the Main Street Electrical Parade, and it was an amazing sight.
I had a lot of pressure on me because, with the exception of the president of the company who said, if you really believe in this thing, go for it, I don't think there was one other person in the entire company that was behind me in this mission.
The great traditions that Walt Disney used to create Disneyland, I think, are still a big part of who and what we are today.
The candlelight processional at Christmas in Town Square.
Another tradition was New Year's Eve party.
And grad nights at Disneyland.
Grad night was something that Walt finally made the decision, well, let's try a grad night. So we called around to some schools, and they seemed to be encouraged about it, and Walt decided, let's do it. And we had the friendly frisk at the main gate.
Traditions, I think they've always been in the park to make sure that the guests are having the greatest time that they can. There's always something new and unusual that we want to present to the guests that they don't expect to see when you come around the corner and see something interesting.
Well, actually, there has been ice skating at Disneyland a couple times, which is kind of strange. Not really so much an ice rink, I'd call it, as an icing over of various areas. The first time that I know about was in 1974. We had a television special that was filmed there starring Sandy Duncan, and there was a wonderful Christmas moment in there, and Winter Wonderland was brought to Main Street in the form of this specially synthetically treated snap-together, it was described at the time as like a jigsaw puzzle, snap-together ice, and then they took all kinds of like fire extinguisher foam to kind of fluff it up around the edges, and Mickey and Minnie were skating around the Christmas tree in Town Square at Disneyland. It was really something. One of the most amazing things that happened on Main Street happened not terribly long ago in just the fall of 2004. We had 3 Olympic gold medalists, Len Krazelberg and Ian Crocker and Michael Phelps. They concluded a 12-city national Swim with the Stars tour at Disneyland, and in order to have somewhere for the stars to swim, in just under 30 hours, Disneyland built an Olympic-sized pool up the length of Main Street.
We have a rich legacy of giving people new experiences when they come in. And Walt talked often about how Disneyland would never be finished. We were always adding to it. And in fact, that's what we continue to do.
When we started to design Hong Kong Disneyland, of course, we looked at all of our Disneylands around the world and tried to pick what was best about each of them. The irony of it was, after all that work, what we wound up with looked remarkably like Disneyland in Anaheim. So it kind of shows that Walt's original formula was a pretty good one. Walt said, never forget that it all started with a mouse. Well, I think our guests say, never forget it all started with Disneyland in Anaheim.
I think, you know, what Walt Disney said when it opened, you know, Disneyland will never be completed as long as there's imagination left in the world, and I think that still remains true today, and it will continue in the future.
You sort of feel like you have this window into the world.
People come to you from every nation, from every walk of life. You see heads of state, you meet all kinds of different people.
We've had 8 U.S. presidents visit Disneyland since Harry Truman. And there's a cute story about when Harry Truman toured Disneyland. He was walking by the Dumbo, the flying elephant attraction. And I think his tour guide said to him, Mr. President, would you and the First Lady like to go on Dumbo? And he looked up at Dumbo and said, no, 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 too much Republican symbolism. We've had international heads of state here, and I think they want to come because it's a part of Americana, if you will. And I think that the U.S. politicians like to be here for the very same reason.
The magic of Walt and what he had created for the world was really, really something of great, enormous impact.
Try to do any research on any topic of Americana and not find a reference to Disneyland. Somebody else may have done something ultimately, but they wouldn't have done it this way.
When it's your Disneyland, that's the flavor and the feel that we try to get across to the guests when they come through the gate. And that's what it was started back in 1955 on July 17th. When he made the statement, "This is your land," I think Walt believed strongly that that's what he hoped the guests would feel. Walt Disney believed that everybody's a kid at heart. What you have to do is find a way to let them be one. And that's been the key, that one single thing.
Walt, your vision was right. You were 100% right. You knew what you were doing. You knew the world needed a place where families could come together, enjoy each other's company, enjoy the company of the guests around them. And you created something that the world would never tire of. And I think that in your own significant way, you made an impact on the world unlike anything that has ever been created.
The most memorable thing for me when I visit our parks is watching the faces of our guests, whether they're grandparents or parents or children, and seeing that excitement, that awe. There's something palpable in the expressions on their faces. And to think that we provide those experiences creates a sense of pride, and it's a great feeling.
As people visit the park, they experience a Disneyland that is as vibrant and relevant today as when it first opened in 1955. Disneyland is 50 years young. It's ageless. And as the world changes through the years, we can be assured that Disneyland will be with us always.
When you wish upon a star, makes no difference who you are. Anything your heart desires will come to you. If your heart is in your dream, no request is too extreme. When you wish upon a star, as dreamers do. Like a bolt out of the blue,
Fate steps in and sees you through.